Chimney Rock, Colorado. We were given the opportunity to stop by Chimney Rock. I had drove past it several times. Always looked real pretty from a distance. What I didn't know is that there was a great house up there. And it's, once again, a perfect example of how the Anasazi worshipped the sun and the moon. We're at Chimney Rock, Colorado. It's beautiful up here. We're at an ancient site here where obviously a lot of people lived, connected to Chaco Canyon, which is about 86 miles away as the bird flies. And we're going to walk around. We're going to look at this great kiva. And then there's some great houses up the mountain, some more towards the pinnacles up here. We're going to go look. And there's also a communication system where the people that lived on this mountain, okay, we know that they were worshiping the sun, moon, and stars. But you'll see that there's a communication system that stretches 86 miles from here to Huerfano to Chaco Canyon, New Mexico. So we're going to walk around and check these things out.
The ancient astronomers that lived high up at Chimney Rock, Colorado. Climb up to the top and you will find the remnants of one of the furthest northeastern outliers of the greater Chacoan area. Much different than the hot and dry deserts of Chaco Canyon in New Mexico. This area is full of mountains and pines and aspen trees as far as the eye can see. Why did they build a great house this high up in the Colorado Rockies? A possible answer can be found between the two peaks at Chimney Rock every 18.6 years, when the major lunar standstill begins its new cycle. Like clockwork, in 2025, a full moon will rise between these two pillars on the mountain, just as it has every 18.6 years prior. This event was significant enough for these people to put forth an economic effort to build a large great house in the Rockies. Using a signaling system that connected high points throughout the entire Southwest, including Chaco Canyon, the nobles and ancient astronomers that lived here could relay messages confirming this lunar standstill and other celestial phenomenon all throughout the four corners in an instant. In an area where the ideal conditions to grow crops fluctuated on a yearly basis, there was zero room for error. These celestial events were sacred to ancient people, which helped them stay in rhythm with their own daily cycles and affairs. For the Anasazi, the observation of the skies seems to be a natural instinct that helped them survive on the Colorado Plateau. What a sight to be seen. The hike up to the great house is well worth the elevation gain, and is a very dramatic change of scenery compared to Chaco Canyon. With the mighty San Juan Mountains and their snow-capped peaks visible in the background, Chimney Rock is one of the greatest examples of Anasazi outliers in the greater Southwest.
But there's also a line-of-sight communication system, all right, that parallels the roads. And I got to work at Chimney Rock in 2009 with Brenda Todd and a crew from University of Colorado. If you've never been to Chimney Rock, go. It's cool. You have a great house up on a ridge overlooking a community of unit pueblos. I mean, it's just classic. And a great kiva down there that seems to be associated with the unit pueblos, not with the Gray's house. Don't know the roads, but it's up in the mountains, so in the forest. I mean, really hard to see roads. What you can see from that spot on the ridge, on the Knife Edge Ridge, if you went 100 meters either way, you wouldn't be able to see this, is looking down the Piedra River, you can see Huerfano Butte, which is a landmark all through the northern San Juan Basin. It's very distinctive. It's a holy place for Navajo people, and probably obviously a very important place for Chaco as well. And from Chimney Rock, one of the things that was excavated there in the 20s was a big square firebox about the size of a kid's sandbox. It was just cherry red outside the building. It was actually right behind where I'm standing when I take this picture. And they're not toasted marshmallows in that. It's something where they're burning big fires, and you see where this is leaded. On Huerfano Mesa, there are more of those fireboxes. There's no pueblo there. There's no great house. There's no reason to have one there. It's a horrible, not horrible, but it's a badlands. It's a place where you couldn't grow corn if you wanted to, around the base of it. And there's the fireboxes there. So there's people up there doing stuff, but there's not a great house, there's not a community. Well, when we were working at Pueblo Alto in Chaco, you look to the north and you can see Huerfano Mesa on the skyline there. And, that dominated the northern skyline. And in Alto, there's big fireboxes with, bright red. So you've got them at Pueblo Alto, at Chaco Canyon, and on Huerfano Mesa, and then up at Chimney Rock. And it's a signaling system. If you saw the Hobbit movies, you might remember the Beacons of Gondor, where they had a series of beacons and repeater stations, right? Because you can't see Chimney Rock from Chaco, but you can see Huerfano. And you can't see Chaco from Chimney Rock, you can see Huerfano. So there's a repeater station in between, which somebody had to be there to pick up the phone and light the fire when it was time to light the fire. That's why I'm saying it's a system. It's integrated. And this also works for Farview at Mesa Verde, which is a Chaco great house. You can't see Chaco from Farview, but you can see Huerfano. So, this is the best attested part of the line of sight system, but I'm pretty confident that it extended all different directions from Chaco. Every time you go on a visually central landform where you can see a lot of stuff and a lot of other great houses, there's a shrine or a firebox or something like that up there.
Some squirrels in the road. There it is. So I'm going to show you this great kiva here. There's a difference between great kivas and pit houses, but what you got here is a great kiva. And there's a real ignorant, liberal view on these things. Nobody knows for certain how kivas were used 1,000 years ago, it says. It says it was probably a community center and was large enough to host, basically the town. But I'm going to go ahead and state the obvious, because there's a lot of people that want to keep these things a mystery. Okay, what you got here is a large, great kiva. You can see it's pretty large in size. And obviously what you got here, you got 3 altars. Okay, you can see these altar-like structures here in the center. I'm going to go ahead and state the obvious. What you got here are sacrificial altars. Okay, obvious sun and moon worship here at this site on this mountain. The whole Chacoan nation, Chaco Canyon being the capital, and all these outliers, they were obviously sacrificing, guys. These are altars. They weren't sending smoke signals with these things. These are sacrificial altars, to the sun and moon gods, whatever they be, All of them had them. They're probably doing this on equinoxes and also solstices. But over here, what you got is more of a pit house. This is more of a house, not necessarily where they're doing sacrifices and all of that, but this is more of like a house. You would have had a fire pit in the center. This is the great kiva. It's way larger. Obviously has the altars in the middle. This here would have a fire pit, have an entrance through the center of the top usually, and ventilation systems in the side of the walls. And then here you got 1, 2, 3 rooms. Sometimes there would be 4 or more, additional rooms for storage or whatever, along with the pit house. And you can see there's some up there that are not excavated. They're all over, laying around. If you know what to look for, you can see them. And yeah, so this is a pit house structure. There's some more we'll go and look at around the corner here. Here's another one.
And then that would have been their chimney cooking.
Yeah, there would have been a hole. There would have been a roof here and a hole. So we're walking up the trail here to the great house that's on the top. And so you can see somebody standing up there on it. That's the uppermost top part of these great houses. You see, we're just about to reach the top. of Chimney Rock. That great kiva is just down in those trees. Just give you an idea of what we're looking at here. See, it's just a straight drop of cliff right here. And then here's the great house. See, and then if you just come over to the side here, you can see one of the pillars there. Supposedly there's some endangered hawks that live on that thing. I can hear them. So they don't let you go up to it, unfortunately, because that's what I wanted to do. So the people that built this place were of the same people that were at Chaco. Of course, that's 86 miles to the south. If you zoom in from here, you can see that's where they would, right there, that's where they had their communication system. They could light a fire over there. They could light a fire right over here. And they could communicate with each other. So we're gonna go look at these fireboxes too. They're up on the back side of this complex here. You can see. Okay, so I'm about 6 foot from the edge here. You can see it's deep down there. And here we have Chimney Rock and Companion Rock. And every 18.6 years, the moon will rise between these rocks from where I'm standing. So we made it to the top here, 7620 feet. But here, this is the burn box. I do believe so. So they would have had, this would have been a large fire pit. Okay, right up here. And from this fire pit, if we turn back towards the south from right here, zoom way in there. But you can see there's Horfano down there. You can see Horfano right there. Okay, that's 60 miles away. They would be able to light a fire here or light a fire there, and they could communicate. Coming back down from the burn box, which is just behind us there, you come up on this great house. As you can see here, here's the great house. And there's another rounded house there, pretty large one.
There's a smaller one behind that one.
That one seems to have some kind of ritual use as well. The little mesa to the right, you can barely see it. That's Horfano. Tiny.
Starting in the early 900s, the people here at Chimney Rock started living here on a year-round basis, building regular structures where they were living here, and they were able to grow corn and beans and squash, as well as take advantage of the, the natural resources in the area. And then there was climate change in the 1100s, and that's when we date their abandonment or leaving.
Around 1000 AD, the settlement took on peculiar changes. Structures of significance began appearing up on the Chimney Rock ridgeline, high above the fertile farmland of the valley floor. This was not necessarily an ideal place to live. It was exposed to the elements. While it is speculated that some food was grown on the ridgeline, much of the food, including game meat, would have required arduous journeys up nearly 1,000 feet in elevation. Clay pottery was most likely also made in the valley below and transported. Once the ridgeline was deforested, firewood would also need to be hauled to the site. However, there is evidence that the people who inhabited the ridgeline devised methods of coping with life at such an elevation.
We used to think that they were hauling water almost all the water had to be hauled up from the Piedra River, which is down at the bottom of the ridge here on the west side. But now, through further exploration, the archaeologists have discovered natural stone depressions, bedrock depressions, that we are sure did contain water. They acted as kind of natural little reservoirs that held water at least during a good part of the year.
The area surrounding the spires was home to as many as 8 separate villages that would have made up a very large community. At its height, the Chimney Rock area may have had a population of up to 4,000 people.
This mound is an unexcavated structure. This is how archaeologists know where to dig. Something is under here. It's very distinctive once you've seen one. It's a nice mound, generally round, with a dip, a kind of a concave round center. And it definitely means there's something under here. Probably another pit house, family residence, and at least 200 of these have been found by the Forest Service in their explorations here at the Chimney Rock National Monument. So lots of people living here, lots going on.
Chimney Rock had a strong connection with the culture of Chaco Canyon, about 90 miles to the south. Both cultures were comprised of a people we know today as ancestral Puebloans.
Well, we know that Chaco Canyon, being the huge cultural center that it was 1,000 years ago, did exert a sphere of influence. We think radiating out about 100 miles in all directions. And we do believe that the people here at Chimney Rock are kind of the edge, the northeast edge of that sphere of influence. The structure at the top of the ridge is a Chacoan Great House Pueblo. It is built the same way the structures in Chaco Canyon itself are built.
Right here we're standing in the Great House on the Chimney Rock Upper Mesa, and it's certainly of a different character than the other buildings in the area. This is definitely Chacoan in the fact of its masonry. So when we see this large stones with interspersed small flat stones between them, and we see them in a horizontal plane for 50, 100 feet, one horizontal plane. That's a distinctive Chacoan feature.
Chimney Rock likely traded its resources of lumber and large game meat to Chaco Canyon. Perhaps the most important export of Chimney Rock, however, was its knowledge of the sun, moon, and stars, which was valuable to the Chacoans for maintaining ceremonial and agricultural calendars. The jagged horizon of the easterly San Juan Mountains made Chimney Rock a particularly great place to measure the cycles of the sun, providing information about equinoxes and solstices. The astronomical significance of Chimney Rock extends far beyond its unique natural horizon line. In fact, archaeologists have discovered what seem to be very intentional alignments with celestial bodies and events in the construction of the Chimney Rock site.
The key point on the celestial alignment here at the Upper Kiva in the Great House at Chimney Rock is associated with these notches in the lower, on the bench over there. These are called pilasters, and they were the support for the roof structure. And these pilasters are lined up celestially. And there's one right underneath me right here. If you take this one, line up with that one, you go straight to the North Star, or the North Pole. And then if you go from the one over on the west to the one on the east, you have the cardinal east-west. And these are not about, these are accurate alignments, as accurate as you can get with stones that have been here for close to 1,000 years. People look at Chimney Rock as one of the most solid examples of the celestial understanding of the ancient Puebloans.
The 3 northern walls of the Chacoan Great House at Chimney Rock may at first look parallel, but in fact they are each angled at a vector that intersects down the ridgeline at a man-made stone basin carved out of solid bedrock.
If you stand on the stone basin during the summer solstice, you will see the orb of the sun rise directly over these 3 walls. And it takes 3 walls because the sun's half a degree wide, so it doesn't rise as a single point source of light. It comes up as an orb, and the orb diameter is emulated in the distance that these 3 walls take up.
The same basin is also aligned in a perfect vector with the southern wall of the Great House. Although it doesn't seem to point to anything of particular importance today, it is very likely that it was pointing to the most significant singular astronomical event of the 11th century.
Using the the stone basin and the south wall is kind of a gun sight. You will be looking at a point on the horizon. And on that point on the horizon, at the course of time, the Great Crab Nebula of the 1050s arose there. You could see it during the daytime, and it lasted for weeks on end.
The Crab Nebula was visible to the naked eye for more than 3 weeks in the year AD 1054 during a historically recorded supernova explosion. Dating of the Great House tells us that its construction began soon after the occurrence of this celestial event. The area where the spectacular sight rose on the horizon was likely remembered along the jagged horizon of the San Juan Mountains. And since many of the celestial events that these early people studied had a cyclical nature, perhaps they believed this strange phenomenon would one day return. Thus, they incorporated its alignment in the Great House construction.
Another part of the National Monument is the Peterson Ridge, or Peterson Mesa, which is a long, rocky ridge. Not a lot of research has been done over there. Fairly remote, you have to get permission to get up there. But enough has been done that definite structures have been located along the top of that ridge. There is some evidence that perhaps the important reason to have people living along the top of that ridge was because of their view of the Chimney Rock Tower.
You cannot be on the Chimney Rock site or on the mesa and see the sunrise between the spires. You have to go over to Peterson Mesa. There's a series of ruins over there, and one in particular is sort of on a larger knoll, and it also appears to have the Chacoan architecture. And that particular area there will get a sunrise through the spires on the summer solstice.
The news of such celestial observations would have been difficult to deliver in a timely fashion to the cultural hub at Chaco Canyon, as it would require a multi-day journey by foot. It is believed that Chimney Rock found a much more efficient manner to communicate the occurrence of celestial events to Chaco Canyon via a series of signal fires.
There is a signal system between Chimney Rock and Chaco Canyon, and if you get up on the upper mesa up here in a local area close to the end of the rocks up here, there's evidence of a fire ring that's a large fire ring. And from that fire ring you can see another series of fire rings on a mesa that's off towards Chaco Canyon, and then from that mesa over there, it's Huérfano Mesa. From Huérfano Mesa, you can see the top of Fajada Butte, which is at Chaco Canyon, and a couple of the other higher mesas at Chaco, which also has evidence of fire signaling.
The people who originally inhabited the area surrounding Chimney Rock were likely a relatively egalitarian society. But with the discovery of the astronomical significance of the site and the construction of a Chacoan Great House, a more rigid social hierarchy may have been imposed.
We do think that there was sort of a controlling influence from Chaco Canyon. Actually, we're quite sure about that. We don't know how to define it because, there's no written record. But for them to have accomplished what they accomplished, especially in the construction of the Great House Pueblo that we have at the top of the ridge, there had to be some pretty strict organization going on and leadership of the local labor.
It appears that there were a lot of people involved with this building. If you have a building of this size with all the stones being carried up, that takes a lot of human energy, a lot of human human hours to do that. And not only that, the dirt that was used for the fill was carried up. The very water that they used to create the mortar for the masonry was carried up.
The society at Chaco Canyon itself was known to be hierarchical, and it is conjectured that Chimney Rock residents may have been put under the rule of astronomer priests who served Chaco Canyon.
The people who lived on the upper trail, which goes up to our wonderful Great House Pueblo, they may have been somewhat higher in the social structure.
It's speculated that astronomer priests were in control of this location and probably in control of the main cultural influence of Chaco Canyon as well. The reason that astronomer priests could have got themselves to a high location within the hierarchy of a culture is because of being able to predict celestial events.
And these people had the knowledge of what to look for in the sky. So they learned patterns, sunrises. They learned the pattern of the moon.
It probably goes all the way through the stars, naming all the constellations, knowing the stars. knowing the doings of the planets and watching the planets, knowing the pathways of the sun and using that knowledge as a calendar, and it appears as well as knowing the moon. You put all those together and that's a full-time job. And it's probably a full-time job for a lot of different people, not just one priest. It's probably a group or a clan that have that understanding. And once they get that understanding, they seem to have been able to influence the rest of the culture.
The unique natural observatory that Chimney Rock provided to the ancestral Puebloan world and the astronomical alignments of the construction at the site likely meant one thing. This outlying Chacoan settlement was likely the grand authority on celestial knowledge for the entire ancestral Puebloan world.
So we believe that the location here did provide the authoritative spot for this kind of celestial observation and information that extended to the whole Chacoan community and other outlying communities in this area.
Now, having the fire ring up here and having the fire communication straight to Chaco Canyon leads one to believe that the people who really knew what was going on were up here, and that they exported that in a very timely fashion, in fact almost instantaneously, down to Chaco, where there were tens of thousands of people possibly gathered in Chaco for celestial events.
The spires of Chimney Rock provide a very unique way to observe the moon as well. Like the sun, the moon moves along the Earth's horizon in a cycle. However, it is a much slower cycle that makes it much harder to observe and record. When the moon reaches the most northerly point along the horizon in the northern hemisphere, this is known as the major lunar standstill, and it just so happens that the spires naturally frame the moon during this rare event for anyone who happened to be standing at the top of the ridgeline. As a result, the people of Chimney Rock may have acquired a knowledge of the moon that had previously been unknown.
What is pretty unique up here is the aspect with the moon. Now, the sun and the stars are used for daily stuff, like you know when to plant your crops. Certain stars appear on the horizon at certain times of the day or night. You can time a yearly calendar with that. But the alignment to the moon is much more significant and much more dramatic in that it only occurs on a window of time every 18 years. The sun cycle happens every year at summer solstice, winter solstice. When it's in that major standstill position, it'll rise between the spires from this location, from the vantage point of this location, at a series lasting in a window of about 3 years. The folks that were up here and studying the sky, having the knowledge of the lunar cycle as being probably, in speculation, probably the first people in the Puebloan culture to really understand it, and then all of a sudden the lunar knowledge got prominence within the culture.
News of this phenomena likely reached Chaco, and the ancestral Puebloans waited for the cycle to repeat itself. 18 years later, in 1076, when the moon was once again at its major lunar standstill position, the Chacoan Great House that now sits at the top of the ridgeline was first constructed.
The common dates given for this great house is 1076 and then 1092. And if you go backwards from the major lunar standstill cycle, it is known that the moon was appearing between the spires on that monthly cycle during the construction phase of this great house. And it was built in two different distinct construction phases. They didn't come in 1076 and then build the 1092. They came in 1076, they built for a while, and then they went away. They did not build in between, and then they came back in 1092 and they built a while. So they were only building during the times that the moon was appearing between the spires. And from this location, if the entrance to around Kiva is generally through the smoke hole that's in the center, and the roof is gone because it's made out of wood and it rotted out. But if you visualize the smoke hole in the center, that smoke hole lines up with the spires at Chimney Rock, where you get the very minimum number of moonrises over the 18.6 years. Maybe one, maybe three. It has a couple of variables in the cycle. So this is as far south as you can go and be on this structure and see the moonrise between the spires. Now, the lunar phenomenon in the celestial realm of things is pretty extraordinary. There's not 5 ancient cultures on the whole face of the planet that have ever gotten a hold of this lunar phenomenon that we theorize about. So the ancient Puebloans getting a hold of this knowledge is quite extraordinary. Being able to be talked about in the same frame as the Egyptians and the makers of Stonehenge and the makers of Machu Picchu is quite a cultural and architectural achievement.
The Anasazi have been portrayed as peaceful, happy farmers, with no problems. But you will see the evidence of violence and warfare almost every place you look. Now, people don't seem to have any problem with violence. You can attack a town, kill 800 people, nobody gets too excited. But people have a big problem watching in this great town.
Watching our evidence say that someone was being eaten.